All right, number 2, similar to number 1, we're going to simplify this complex problem. So we have the square root of negative 10 times the square root of negative 11. Okay, 10 and 11 do not have perfect squares and they cannot be simplified. But what we can do is pull out the i's. So, or the imaginary part. So because of the negative under the square root, we're going to rewrite this as I times the square root of 10. And then we're going to multiply that by I times the square root of 11. All right, and then we will multiply these two terms together. So because they're both under square root and we've already simplified as much as we can, then we can now multiply these two together because they're both under square root. And we can also multiply the i's together. So I times I will give us I squared. And then 10 times 11 will give us 110 underneath the square root. 110 under the square root. And then we can simplify the I squared and make it a negative. So our final answer will be negative square root of 110. All right, number 3, they've already simplified it to the imaginary part for us, so we don't have to deal with the square root part. We only have to multiply the numbers. So we have negative 4i times 3i. Now be careful, just because you see a negative, don't always try to change it into imaginary, because once you get used to doing that with square root, you might just make that mistake. So just be wary of that. Just because you have a negative doesn't mean it's going to turn into imaginary. Only time you do that is when that negative is underneath the square root. All right, so here we're just going to multiply as normal. Negative 4 times negative 3 will give us a negative 12. And then the I times I will give us I squared. All right, we're going to rewrite the I squared as a negative 1. So what we're looking at is negative 12 times negative 1, and negative times a negative will give us a positive. So our final answer will just be positive 12. All right, and then we're going to also do number 4 here. This one wants us to use the distributive property. So we have 7 outside of parentheses times inside parentheses 2 minus 6i. And we're going to write this in the a plus bi form, okay, which is standard form for complex numbers. All right, so we're going to multiply 7 times 2, just distribute, and we're also going to multiply the 7 times the negative 6i. 7 times 2 will give us 14, and then 7 times the negative 6 will give us a negative 42. And then we just attach the I. So this is already in that A plus BI form. Now I know it says plus, but plus or minus, just depending on what the sign is. So that's all we have to do is just multiply, distribute that 7 throughout the parentheses, and we have 14 minus 42i.